The frontier outpost on 442B was the kind of place where people came to disappear. It sat on the edge of known space, a collection of rusted buildings and temporary shelters that had somehow become permanent over the years. Humans, aliens, and everything in between passed through its dusty streets. Most of them were running from something. Danny was no different. He walked through the morning market with his hands in his pockets and his eyes scanning the stalls. He was 34 years old, with tired eyes and calloused hands that told the story of a man who had worked hard for everything he never managed to keep. 3 years ago, he had been a cargo pilot with his own ship. Now he was a salvager who picked through abandoned mining sites for anything he could trade. It was not much of a life, but it was the only one he had left. The market was busy today. Traders from a dozen different species called out their prices while customers argued and haggled. Danny moved past stalls selling engine parts, food rations, and strange alien artifacts that nobody could identify. He was looking for a buyer for the power cells he had found last week. They were old but still functional, and he hoped they would bring enough credits to cover his rent for another month. He stopped when he heard the commotion near the center of the market. A crowd had gathered around a group of traders. There were reptilian creatures with scales the color of dried blood and eyes that held no warmth. They were known throughout the galaxy for their brutal practices and their complete lack of mercy. Danny had learned long ago to stay away from them. But something made him push through the crowd to see what was happening. He wished he had not. They were dragging a chained alien female across the ground. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with silver skin that seemed to glow faintly in the morning light. Her eyes were large and violet, filled with a dignity that her chains could not take away. Danny recognized her species immediately. She was one of the proudest warrior races in the galaxy. To see one of them in chains was almost unthinkable. The lead, a male with a missing eye, announced that the female was for sale. She was strong and healthy, perfect for labor in the mining colonies. The bidding would begin at 500 credits. Danny felt something twist in his stomach. He had seen terrible things in his years on the frontier. He had learned to look away and mind his own business. That was how people survived out here, but he could not look away from this. The female met his eyes through the crowd, and in that moment something passed between them that he could not explain. The bidding began. A mining foreman offered 600 credits. A factory owner countered with 700. The smiled his cold smile and encouraged them to bid higher. The female stood silent through it all, her head held high despite her chains. Danny checked his pockets. He had 40 credits, not even enough to enter the bidding. He looked around desperately, trying to think of something he could do, but there was nothing. He was just one man with empty pockets in a galaxy that did not care about justice. Then the sigh fell on Danny's belt, more specifically on the old military canteen that hung there. It was battered and worn, with scratches that told of decades of use. It had belonged to Danny's grandfather, who had carried it through 3 wars on Earth before the age of space travel. It was the only thing Danny had left from his family. He had refused to sell it even when he was starving. He pointed at the canteen and asked what it was. Danny explained that it was an antique, a water container from old Earth. The eyes lit up with interest. He was a collector of human artifacts, he said. There was something fascinating about the primitive craftsmanship of the species. Danny saw his opportunity and seized it before he could think twice. He offered to trade the canteen for the female. The crowd went silent. They stared at him for a long moment, then burst into laughter. His companions joined in, their hissing chuckles filling the air. But they accepted. He found it amusing, he said. A human trading his precious heirloom for an alien he did not even know. It would make a good story to tell. He tossed the chain to Danny and snatched the canteen from his belt. The trade was complete. Danny led the female away from the crowd as quickly as he could. He found a quiet alley between 2 storage buildings and stopped to remove her chains. His hands were shaking as he worked on the locks. He did not fully understand what he had just done or why he had done it. The chains fell away and the female rubbed her wrists where the metal had dug into her silver skin. She looked down at Danny with those luminous violet eyes and asked him a question he could not answer. She wanted to know why he had done it. Why had he traded something of personal value for a stranger he would never see again? Danny told her that he did not know. It had felt like the right thing to do. He asked her name. She said her name was. She continued to stare at him with a mixture of confusion and something that might have been curiosity. She said that she had traveled to many worlds and met many species. She had never encountered one that acted as he did. Danny shrugged and said that humans were strange. He told her that she was free now and could go wherever she wanted. He turned to leave, figuring that was the end of it, but grabbed his arm and stopped him. Her grip was strong, much stronger than a human's. She said that there was something he needed to know, something important, but before she could explain, a strange sound filled the air. It was a deep pulse that seemed to vibrate through the ground and into Danny's bones. He looked up at the sky. 3 massive ships had appeared in orbit above the planet. They were sleek and silver, built for war, ships. His face had gone pale. She whispered that her people had come. They must have been tracking her captors, but they did not know what had happened here. They did not know that Danny had freed her. All they knew was that she had been taken and that someone on this planet had possessed her. Danny asked what that meant, turned to him with fear in her eyes, fear not for herself but for him. She explained that by law, anyone who possessed a captive of their race was declared prey. The hunt would begin at nightfall, and the hunters would not stop until Danny was dead. Danny stood there in the dusty alley, staring up at the ships that had come to kill him, and realized that his simple act of kindness had just become the worst mistake of his life. Danny followed to a small room he rented above a repair shop. It was not much, just a bed and a table and a window that looked out over the dusty streets below. But it was private, and right now privacy was what they needed. Paced back and forth across the small space while Danny sat on the edge of his bed and tried to understand what was happening. She explained everything in quick, urgent words. They were a warrior race, she said. Honor and law governed every aspect of their lives. When one of their own was taken captive, it was considered the greatest insult. The response was always the same: the hunt. Danny asked her to explain what the hunt meant, stopped packing and looked at him with those violet eyes. She said that it was not simply a death sentence. It was a ritual that had existed for thousands of years. When it was captured, the one who held them was declared prey. Hunters were sent to track the prey across any distance, through any obstacle. The hunt ended only when the prey was killed or when they proved themselves worthy through survival and combat. Danny asked if anyone had ever been declared worthy, shook her head slowly. No one had ever survived long enough to earn that status. The hunters were the best warriors of her race. They trained their entire lives for moments like this. He stood up and walked to the window. The 3 ships still hung in the sky like silver threats. He asked why she could not simply tell them what had happened. She had been there. She had seen him free her. Surely her word would mean something. Explained that it was not that simple. By law, she was now a witness. She could not interfere with the hunt in any way. She could only observe and record what happened. If she tried to help him or speak on his behalf, she would be violating sacred traditions. The punishment for that was death. Danny turned back to face her. He said that this was insane. He had saved her life. He had given up the only valuable thing he owned to free her from slavery, and now her people wanted to kill him for it. Nodded sadly. She said that she understood his frustration. She had spent her whole life following the laws of her people without question. But standing here now, watching an innocent man face death for an act of kindness, she was beginning to wonder if those laws made sense. A loud tone echoed through the settlement. It came from the communication system that connected all the buildings in the outpost. A deep voice spoke in a language Danny did not understand. Translated for him. The hunters had announced their arrival. The hunt would begin at moonrise. All other species were warned not to interfere. Danny checked the time. He had 6 hours. 6 hours to figure out how to survive against warriors who had never been defeated. He asked if there was any way out of this. Could he hide? Could he run? Told him that running was useless. They had tracked prey across entire star systems. Their senses were far beyond human capability. They could see heat signatures, hear heartbeats from 100 meters away. No one had ever escaped them by running. Danny asked what other options he had. Said there was only one. If he could survive until dawn, the rules of engagement would change. The night hunt would be over, and he would have the right to demand a formal challenge. It was still almost certain death, but it gave him a small chance. He laughed bitterly and said that surviving until dawn sounded easy. Just stay alive for one night against the deadliest hunters in the galaxy. No problem. Did not smile. She said that she wished she could help him, but she was bound by laws older than human civilization. All she could do was bear witness. Danny was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked to tell him everything she knew about the hunters. their tactics, their weaknesses, their habits. If he was going to survive this night, he needed every advantage he could get. She hesitated. Sharing such information was close to interference, but she had already begun to question her laws. She decided that answering questions was not the same as actively helping. It was a thin line, but she would walk it. For the next 2 hours told Danny everything she knew. The hunters worked in groups of 3. They communicated through subsonic tones that humans could not hear. They preferred to chase their prey rather than ambush them, because the thrill of the hunt was part of the ritual. They were strongest in open terrain where their speed and size gave them advantage. In tight spaces, their bulk became a problem. Danny listened carefully and formed a plan. He knew the terrain around the outpost from his years of salvage work. There were abandoned mining tunnels to the north that humans had dug decades ago. The tunnels were narrow and unstable. A warrior would have trouble moving through them. He gathered what supplies he could find: a knife, a flashlight, some rope, and a few chemical compounds from his salvage collection. He knew he could not fight the hunters directly. He would have to be smart. He would have to use the environment against them. As the sun began to set, Danny stood at the edge of the settlement and looked toward the wilderness beyond. The twin moons of 442b were rising on the horizon. Soon the hunt would begin. Came to stand beside him. She said that she would follow at a distance, as tradition demanded. She would not help him, but she would witness his struggle. If he died, she would make sure his bravery was remembered. Danny thanked her. It was not much comfort, but it was something. A shuttle descended from the orbiting ships and landed at the far end of the settlement. 3 figures emerged. They were massive, at least 8 feet tall, with silver skin but darker, almost gray. They wore armor that seemed to be part of their bodies. Each carried an energy lance that hummed with deadly power. The lead hunter, a male with ritual scars across his face, approached the center of the settlement. He announced his name. He had come to hunt the prey called Danny. The hunt would begin when the moons reached their peak. The prey was given a head start, as tradition demanded. Danny did not wait to hear more. He turned and ran toward the wilderness, toward the tunnels that might be his only hope of survival. Behind him, the hunters watched and waited. The night was young and they were patient. They had never lost a hunt before. They did not intend to start now. Danny ran through the darkness with his heart pounding in his chest. The twin moons cast pale light across the rocky terrain, creating shadows that seemed to move and shift around him. He could hear nothing behind him yet, but he knew the hunters were coming. They were always coming. He reached the entrance to the old mining tunnels after 20 minutes of hard running. His lungs burned and his legs ached, but he did not stop. He ducked inside the narrow opening and switched on his flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing walls of rough stone and wooden support beams that had seen better days. The tunnels were exactly as he remembered them: narrow, twisting, and unstable. Human miners had dug them 50 years ago, searching for rare minerals that turned out to be worthless. They had abandoned the project and left the tunnels to collapse on their own. Most people avoided this place. Danny was counting on the hunters not knowing it as well as he did. He moved deeper into the maze, leaving small markers on the walls so he would not get lost. The air grew cold and damp as he descended. He could hear water dripping somewhere in the distance. Every sound made him flinch, expecting to see silver-gray warriors emerging from the shadows. After an hour of careful movement, Danny found the chamber he was looking for. It was a large open space where several tunnels met. Old mining equipment sat rusted and forgotten in the corners. More importantly, there were crates of abandoned explosives. The miners had left them behind when they fled the collapsing tunnels. Decades of neglect had made them unstable, but Danny hoped they were still functional. He set to work quickly. He rigged the explosives at key points around the chamber, creating a trap that would bring down the ceiling if triggered. It was dangerous. If he miscalculated, he would bury himself along with the hunters. But he had no other choice. The first hunter found him 2 hours before dawn. Danny heard the subsonic hum before he saw anything. It was a vibration in the air that made his teeth ache. Then a massive figure appeared at the far end of one tunnel. The warrior moved with frightening grace despite his size. His eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, seeing heat that Danny's flashlight could not reveal. Danny ran. He sprinted through the tunnels with the hunter close behind, the sound of heavy footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The warrior was faster than him on open ground, but the narrow passages slowed him down. His shoulders scraped against the walls as he pursued. Danny led him toward the trapped chamber. He waited until the hunter was directly beneath the rigged ceiling, then triggered the explosives. The blast was deafening in the confined space. Stone and dust came crashing down, burying the tunnel in rubble. Danny threw himself backward just in time. He lay on the ground, coughing and gasping as the dust settled around him. When he finally managed to stand, he saw that the tunnel was completely blocked. The hunter was trapped on the other side. But trapped was not the same as dead. Through the rubble, Danny could hear the warrior moving. He was injured, perhaps, but still alive, and now he would be angry. Danny did not wait around to find out. He fled deeper into the tunnels, searching for another way to survive until dawn. The second hunter found him an hour later. This one was smarter than the first. He did not chase Danny through the narrow tunnels. Instead, he waited at a junction point, forcing Danny to come to him. Danny rounded a corner and found himself face to face with the massive warrior. The raised his energy lance, the weapon humming with deadly power. Danny had nowhere to run. He did the only thing he could think of. He threw a handful of chemical powder into the warrior's face. It was a compound he had salvaged weeks ago, meant for industrial cleaning. It burned on contact with organic tissue. The hunter roared in pain and stumbled backward. Danny rushed past him, slashing with his knife as he went. The blade caught the warrior's arm, drawing a line of dark blood across silver-gray skin. It was a small wound, but it was something. The hunter recovered faster than Danny expected. A massive hand grabbed his shoulder and threw him against the wall. Danny's vision exploded with stars as his head struck stone. He felt ribs crack under the impact. But the hunter hesitated. He stared at the blood on his arm with something like disbelief. A human had wounded him. This had never happened during a hunt. For just a moment he was confused. Danny used that moment to escape. He crawled through a gap in the tunnel wall that was too small for the hunter to follow. He kept crawling until he emerged in a different section of the mine, gasping and bleeding but still alive. The hours crawled by. Danny stayed on the move, never resting for more than a few minutes. He used every trick he knew to stay ahead of the hunters. He doubled back on his trail. He used water to mask his heat signature. He found narrow passages where the warriors could not follow. Somewhere in the darkness followed and watched. She saw Danny fall and rise again. She saw him bleed and keep running. She saw him fight with desperate cleverness against opponents who should have killed him in seconds. And slowly, something changed inside her. She had witnessed many hunts in her life. She had never seen prey like this. As the first light of dawn began to creep through cracks in the tunnel ceiling, Danny emerged from the mines. He was covered in dust and blood. His ribs screamed with every breath, but he was alive. Was waiting for him. The lead hunter stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking a vast canyon. Behind him, the sun was beginning to rise. Danny had made it through the night, but raised his lance anyway. The ritual was complete, he said. The prey had survived until dawn, but that did not mean he had to let him live. Tradition allowed for execution at this point if the hunter deemed the prey unworthy. Danny stood there, exhausted and broken with no fight left in him. He had done everything he could. It had not been enough. Then a voice rang out across the clifftop. Stepped between Danny and her arms spread wide. She said that she would not allow this. Danny had proven himself. He deserved the chance to fight properly. Stared at her in shock. She had broken sacred law. She had interfered with the hunt. Everything was about to change. The silence on that clifftop was absolute. Stood frozen with his lance still raised, his eyes fixed on with a mixture of shock and fury. In all his years as a hunter, no witness had ever broken the sacred vow of non-interference. It was unthinkable. It was blasphemy. Held her ground. Her silver skin seemed to glow in the early morning light. She said that she knew what she had done. She knew the consequences, but she could not stand by and watch an innocent man be executed for an act of mercy. Lowered his lance slowly. He told that she had condemned herself. By stepping between hunter and prey, she had invoked an ancient right. She had claimed Danny as her charge. If wanted to kill him now, he would have to kill her first. Danny tried to protest. He said that should not throw her life away for him. He was just a human salvager with nothing to offer. She should step aside and let the hunt end as it was meant to. But refused. She said that Danny had taught her something important in the past few hours. He had shown her that courage and honor were not the same as following laws without question. They prided themselves on being warriors, But what kind of warriors hunted a man for saving someone's life? Struggled with her words. His entire existence was built on the laws and traditions of his people. He had never questioned them. He had never needed to. The prey ran, the hunters chased, and the strong survived. That was the way things had always been. But there was another option, he said, an older right that predated even the hunt. If Danny wanted to live, he could demand a formal challenge, single combat between hunter and prey. If Danny won, the hunt would be declared complete and he would be named worthy. If he lost, both he and would die for their transgressions. Danny looked at. The warrior was 8 feet tall and covered in muscle. He had trained his entire life for combat. Danny was a cargo pilot turned salvager who had never been in a real fight before last night. The outcome seemed obvious, but took his hand and told him that this was his only chance. The formal challenge had rules that the hunt did not. It would be a fair fight, witnessed by all. If he died, he would die with honor, and perhaps, just perhaps, he might find a way to win. Danny thought about his life up to this point. He had lost his ship. He had lost his family's legacy. He had spent 3 years scraping by in the dirt of a forgotten colony. Maybe this was how it was supposed to end. Maybe he was meant to die on this alien world, fighting for something that actually mattered. He accepted the challenge. The next 12 hours were the most intense of Danny's life. Took him to a secure location and began teaching him everything she knew about combat. She showed him their fighting stances, their attack patterns, their weak points. The knowledge was sacred, passed down only within warrior families. By sharing it with an outsider, she was committing yet another violation of tradition. Danny learned that was a master of the energy lance. He used its reach to keep opponents at distance and its power to end fights quickly. But he was also proud. He had never faced an enemy who thought differently than the warriors he had trained against his whole life. His weakness was his certainty that he would win. Taught Danny how to move like a. The stances felt strange and unnatural to his human body, but he practiced them over and over until his muscles burned. She showed him where to strike if he got close enough. The joints beneath the arms, the pressure points along the spine, the vulnerability in the throat. When the sun reached its peak, messengers from the fleet announced that the challenge would take place at sunset. A ceremonial platform was being constructed in the center of the settlement. The entire fleet would watch from orbit. This was no longer just a hunt. It was an event that would be recorded in their histories. Danny rested for a few hours while watched over him. He did not sleep well. His dreams were filled with silver warriors and energy lances and the sound of his own bones breaking. But when he woke, he felt strangely calm. Whatever happened next, he had made his choice. The sun began to set. Danny walked to the ceremonial platform with at his side. The entire settlement had turned out to watch. Humans and a dozen other species stood in a wide circle around the raised platform. Above them, the ships hung like silver judgment. Was already waiting. He stood in the center of the platform, his energy lance humming with power. He had removed his armor for the challenge, wearing only the traditional combat wraps of his people. Even without protection, he looked invincible. Danny climbed onto the platform. He had been given a fighting blade, a curved weapon designed for close combat. It felt heavy in his hands. He had practiced with it for hours, but it still felt foreign. A horn sounded from somewhere above. The challenge had begun. Attacked immediately. He moved faster than anything Danny had ever seen, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. The energy lance swept toward Danny's head with enough force to crush his skull. Danny ducked. The lance passed over him close enough that he felt the heat of its energy field. He tried to counter with his blade, but was already moving again. A massive fist caught Danny in the chest and sent him flying across the platform. He hit the ground hard. His cracked ribs screamed in protest. He struggled to his feet just in time to avoid another lance strike that scorched the platform where he had been lying. The fight continued, was everywhere at once, attacking from angles Danny could not predict. The lance left burns and cuts across Danny's arms and legs. Blood dripped onto the platform, human red against alien metal. The watching began to murmur. They had expected a quick execution. Instead, they were seeing a human who refused to fall. Danny took hit after hit and kept getting up. He was clearly outmatched, but he would not surrender. Watched with her heart in her throat. She had seen countless challenges in her life. She had never seen anyone absorb this much punishment and keep fighting. Finally, landed a devastating blow. The lance struck Danny across the back and sent him sprawling to the edge of the platform. He tried to rise, but his body would not respond. The world spun around him in a haze of pain. Walked toward him slowly, savoring the victory. He raised his lance for the killing strike and told Danny that he had fought well for a human. He should take comfort in knowing that his death would be recorded with honor. Danny looked up at the warrior towering over him. He knew he could not win this fight with strength. He had known that from the beginning, but there was one weapon he had not yet tried, one thing that humans had and did not. He dropped his blade and spoke. He asked why the hunted at all. He asked what purpose was served by killing someone who only wanted to help. Froze, the question hung in the air between them, and for the first time in his life, the mighty hunter had no answer. The ceremonial platform fell completely silent, stood with his lance raised, but he did not strike. Danny's question echoed in his mind like a sound he could not stop hearing. Why did the hunt? What purpose did it serve? Danny pulled himself to his knees, blood dripping from a dozen wounds. He continued speaking in a voice that carried across the silent crowd. He said that he understood that had been captured. He understood that her captivity was a crime against her people, but he was not the one who captured her. He was the one who freed her. He said that on Earth in human culture, when someone saved a life, they were considered a hero. They were thanked and honored. They were not hunted down and killed. He asked if that made sense. He asked if killing a rescuer was really justice or if it was something else entirely. Lowered his lance slightly. His face showed confusion, an expression that looked strange on a warrior who had always known exactly what to do. He said that the law was the law. It had been written thousands of years ago by their ancestors. It was not his place to question it. Danny shook his head. He said that laws were made by people. They could be changed by people. A law that punished kindness was not a good law. It was a mistake that had never been corrected. Maybe it was time to correct it. From somewhere in the crowd, a new voice spoke. It was deep and commanding, carrying an authority that made everyone turn to look. An older female was descending from a shuttle that had landed at the edge of the settlement. She was tall even by standards, with silver skin that had darkened with age and eyes that held the weight of centuries. Gasped, she whispered to Danny that this was High Commander. She was the leader of the fleet and one of the oldest living members of their species. She had been present when some of the hunt laws were originally written. Walked through the crowd, which parted before her like water. She climbed onto the platform and approached Danny with slow, measured steps. She studied him for a long moment, taking in his wounds and his defiant posture and the strange fire that still burned in his human eyes. She asked Danny to repeat his question. He did. Was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke to the gathered crowd and the ships watching from above. She said that she remembered when the hunt laws were written. She had been young then, barely more than a child. The laws were created to protect them from those who would harm them. They were meant to punish captors and slavers, not rescuers. But over the centuries, she said, the laws had become rigid. They no longer served their original purpose. They had become rules followed for their own sake, without thought or wisdom. Danny's question had exposed this truth. A law that punished kindness was not justice. It was tyranny. She turned to and asked him what he believed. Did he truly think Danny deserved death for saving life? Struggled visibly. His whole identity was built on following the laws without question, but he could not deny what he had seen. Danny had fought with courage that had rarely witnessed in any species. He had survived a night hunt through cleverness and determination, and in the end, instead of begging for his life, he had asked a question that cut to the heart of everything the believed. Said that he did not know what he believed anymore. He said that Danny had surprised him. He had fought as no human had ever fought before. Perhaps the laws needed to change. Perhaps they all needed to change. Nodded, she raised her voice and declared that the challenge was complete. Danny had proven himself worthy, more than worthy. She declared him a friend to a status never before granted to a non. He would be protected by her people and welcomed among them as an honored guest. The crowd erupted in murmurs of shock and confusion. This had never happened before. It went against everything they had been taught. But silenced them with a raised hand. She said that they had prided themselves on being a warrior race for thousands of years, but true warriors knew when to fight and when to show mercy. True warriors questioned laws that did not serve justice. True warriors recognized courage in all its forms, even when it came from unexpected places. She looked at Danny and said that his grandfather would be proud. Danny blinked in surprise. He had not mentioned his grandfather, smiled slightly, and said that she had done her research during the hunt. She knew about the canteen and what it meant to him. She knew about his family's military history. She understood what he had sacrificed to save a stranger. Rushed to Danny's side as he finally collapsed from exhaustion and blood loss. Medical personnel from the fleet were already arriving to treat his wounds. She held his hand and told him that he had done something incredible. He had changed the course of history with a single question. Danny managed a weak smile. He said that all he had wanted was to help someone who needed it. He had not planned on starting a revolution. Approached them slowly. He stood before Danny and offered a warrior's salute, fist pressed to chest. He said that he had been wrong. Danny had taught him something valuable. He hoped they could begin again, not as hunter and prey, but as something else, perhaps as allies. Danny accepted the salute with a nod. He said that he would like that. 6 months later, Danny had become the first human ambassador to the people. His story had spread across the galaxy, inspiring others to question old laws and traditions that no longer served their purpose. The hunt laws were being rewritten for the first time in 10,000 years, with input from species across the known worlds. Had chosen to stay with Danny as his advisor and friend. She had left behind her role as a witness and had become something new. She was a bridge between their peoples, helping them understand each other. And the old canteen that had started everything was returned to Danny by the trader who had taken it. He said that the story was worth more than any artifact. Danny hung it in his office as a reminder of what one act of kindness could accomplish. He often looked at it when the work of building peace between species became difficult. It reminded him that even the smallest gesture could change the galaxy. Sometimes all it took was one person willing to trade everything for a stranger. And sometimes all it took was one question that no one had ever thought to ask.